This is the show dedicated to raising up the next generation of men of faith and character. My name is Mark Stanifer. Welcome to the Next Man Up. Well, hey guys, welcome back once again to the Next Man Up show. So good to have you with us as always, and to have you along on this journey and this community that is focused on raising up the next generation of healthy and godly men, because when we can do that, everyone benefits. You know this, my name is Mark. Good to be with you as always, and I'm excited to bring you part 2 of our conversation that we started last week with Kent Irwin. However, before I do that, I want to ask you, those of you that are regular listeners that enjoy this content that we're bringing to you on a weekly basis, would you do us a huge favor? Would you go out to Apple Podcasts and just give us a rating and leave us a review or a comment? Let us know what you think and help us to get this content in the hands of more dads and more men who want to be more healthy and more godly. The second ask I have for you is, if you are not already part of our mail list, well, how about getting signed up? In the process, you can download our free guide, 4 things that boys need to become men. You can do all of that on our website, thenextmanup.com. If you haven't joined our mail community, our NM update community, I invite you to do so even right now before we get into part 2. And then finally, if you have any feedback, you want to contact us, reach out to us, you can email us at feedback@thenextmanup.com, or you can get us on our Facebook page at NMU Journey. Well, as we started last week, we're talking with Kent Irwin, a husband, a father, and currently serving on staff with a local church in a ministry capacity of helping people to manage their money better. He had a long career in the financial services space as an advisor or creating tools for families to use, and yet ultimately his heart was drawn into a ministry space, which is what he's doing today. Last time we started the conversation looking at money from the context of a marriage relationship and eliminating competition and how to create shared goals and improving your overall relationship by improving how you manage your money together. This time, we're going to take a look at this money topic from the perspective of a parent and how, as a dad, you can set your kids up well for success as adults by helping them to learn and grow and understand money better. We get into things like creating budgets for your kids and modeling for them the desired behavior, helping them to devise plans long before they become adults so that they know where they're headed once they launch. And Kent also shares some suggested books and other content to help you take some important steps forward and be able to lead yourself and to lead your family better at home. I'm excited to share this second half of the conversation with you. I know there's some good stuff in here for you, so let's get to it. Here's part 2 of Talking Money with Kent Irwin. Okay, so let's pivot a little bit. We've been talking a lot about mom and dad and relationship and parents and the adult side of things. But I also know that there's a lot that needs to be done in raising up kids. In this context, we're usually talking about boys, but it applies to more than just boys. There's a lot that must be done in raising up kids to know and learn and manage their financial picture well. So let's talk a little bit about how as dads we can help our kids become more wise, more savvy when it comes to financials. So let's set the stage. When you're looking at it from the parenting perspective and raising up those kids, what are some of the big challenges that parents are facing in that parent role when they're trying to help their kids learn and manage financials well?
Well, kids they have their own egos and their own desires for self. So they think mom and dad are just an endless source of cash, a source of endless cash,
Yep,
right?
Yep.
The old T-shirt that Dave Ramsey talks about that he saw some guy wears, I am my kid's ATM.
Yep.
It's kind of a good picture. So I think one place to start is to begin learning some good stewardship concepts for the family. And what does that mean? It means having fences around certain areas of spending, of disposable income. What I mean are after we've paid our fixed expenses, shopping, groceries, we need to have fences around that. And we need to have goals for saving for the future and for paying off debt. That is a real quick, and including tithing in there. I think that's a really good, healthy description of what good household finances would be like. So I think a really good place to start is to first model it, because kids can see by observation how well their parents are managing money. If there's lots of stress in the household, lots of debt, that stress is going to transfer to the kids. And they're going to see that, oh, I was raised in a household that we were always worried about money. So that's the first place to start. The second place to start is we didn't list these goals on a piece of paper, but my wife and I were both wired to the same. We wanted our kids to not have the debt we had when they got older. And we wanted them to be self-sufficient in their careers. And we knew that they went hand in hand. So when we were raising our kids, it was with the idea that they would, at the age of 18, they would have a plan. They would either have a plan that they would either have a skill that they would start a full-time job at age 18 and provide for themselves and work on their own, or they would be going to college for 4 years and they'd be working on advanced education so that they could have a different set of skills to get a job to be self-sufficient. That was the plan. And we didn't make life comfortable for them as they were getting older. We made them more responsible. We didn't just give them money. They had to have jobs. They had to start to assume some of the responsibility. They had to see what a paycheck's like. They had to know what it was like. And they had curfews. They had things like this. So there was a tension there that, oh, I want to have control of my own money. I want to have control of my own life. I want to be self-responsible. So we love our kids. But at the age of 18 to 20, we knew that they would be more productive, mature adults if they assumed taking care of themselves after that age. It wasn't even an option that they could just lay around the house and not do anything. We would joke, say, well, at age 18, you have to have a plan to be on your own, be in college full time, or be in the military. Choose one of the three. Now, we wouldn't have forced them to join the military, but the idea was that was the expectation. But as they were younger, we might have had small allowances, but there was also, I think, a requirement that there's chores and maybe there's payment with chores and that you would save money. One thing we did do a great job of, but we always, for most of our adult lives, we've paid a tithe. We probably should have lived that a little bit out loud, or when they got birthday money, say, well, you owe 10% of that to the tithe jar, and some for savings and some for the things that you want to buy. So that's a really good way to kind of model daily budgeting. As our children got older, especially my daughter, we set up a checking account for her, and we put money in her account each month that we'd have normally purchased for personal care products and her clothing and her school fees. So she was responsible for managing her own budget for those expenses that were directly related to her that would have come out of our income. And when we did that, the light bulb went on. She said, well, how do you know how much you're spending? Well, we had 10 years of Quicken, so we were able to calculate it. And then she said, what happens if I go less? Yeah, you see. Mm-hmm. So what happened is that when she bought her own shampoo, she bought the Suave. A month before we did this plan, that she wanted the $7 bottle of shampoo for her hair. When it was her money and there was a kind of cost benefit thing going on and managing her own money, the light bulb went on. So when our kids went off to college, they had jobs, they had to manage finances, and they had their budgets. And it was just amazing to see them manage kind of a budget as they got older. And they still do that to this day. They're not perfect, you know, and they're like everybody else. They struggle with these things, but they're doing really good.
So you've mentioned debt a couple of times, and I have my own perspectives on debt. And to be in full disclosure here, we as a family have been debt free for probably about 15 years, and so it affords us a lot of options and flexibility and freedom that most people think isn't possible. So because debt is so pervasive, and like we should be clear, debt isn't just the mortgage or the car payment, it's the school loans and it's the credit card swipe and it's the furniture and
Right.
it's all these things that we have deferred. I have my own perspective on debt. Just for me, I'm curious if would you just talk a little bit more about your perspective on debt, and when you get into this conversation around debt with your clients, with the folks that you're ministering to, what do you tell them, and how do you help them to look at it a little bit differently and begin to move beyond just that tendency for instant card swipe type of behavior?
Well, Scripture tells us that debt is slavery. That it's like when we're in debt, it's like that we are slaves to debt and to the lender. So I think that's a really good place to start. Now, the Bible doesn't forbid debt, but it doesn't say anything good about it. So is there good debt and bad debt? Well, there's some debt that's not as bad, and that might be called investment debt. So you might borrow to invest in a piece of real estate that would appreciate. That might make sense. The same thing might be you might get student loans so that your future career is better. That's usually okay, but I just would recommend that people keep it moderate amounts. I've known people that have had jobs, pulled their way through college, and still had loans. And then I know people that lived on loans the entire college experience, and the amount of debt that was acquired was quite a bit different. But generally, investment debt is okay. The consumer debt is what we find to be the worst, because it tends to be impulsive. It tends to rob people's wealth accumulation. It makes our daily lives more stressful, and it's just really hard to live with credit card debt and car loans and furniture loans, because it just saps our budget, so there's no money left over at the end of the month. We're just living to make loans on a depreciating asset. So we buy a car for $20,000, and by the time we get it paid off, we've spent $25,000 because of the interest charges, and it's now worth 10. Oh, and we have to maintain this piece of metal out in the garage that's falling apart with each day, right? More and more things, it needs work. So those, we really recommend against consumer debt. If you can go an entire lifetime without consumer debt, we see people accumulate a lot more money. They're more generous with those around them. There's less stress. And we also see with those are elements that contribute to career advancement. People that live that way tend to be more mature. They function better in a work environment with less stress, and they tend to, statistics have proven that they do better in their career, which means usually a greater income. Not always. Maybe they're just, they could be in a field that there's not great economic advancement. But it might not work in a corporation where they can climb the ladder. But the point being that we find that when there's less debt or very little debt or no debt, like you said, life goes along a lot smoother. We save for the things that we want to purchase. If there's an emergency, we have savings to pay for that car repair. It doesn't become debt on a credit card because we're totally maxed out on our debt.
I know that all of this, you mentioned Ramsey. One of the things that he says is managing your money well is like 80% behavior and 20% knowledge, right? I know there's a lot of behavioral decisions to this. But I think it's also worth pointing out that what you're describing, that life free of consumer debt, is possible. It's not just for the uber wealthy, right? Like those that make tons and tons of money. It's possible, and I think that sometimes there are those that just aren't convinced that that's possible for them, or that you have to make a certain amount of money in order to be able to live like that. The answer is no. It's just you have to make that choice and then orient yourself around that.
Yeah, it's a new way of looking at the world. Credit is not an option. If you can kind of live that way, that it's the emergencies or the way I live my life, that there's not a line item in my budget called debt. Not an option. And I think it's a way to walk more faithfully. Scripture tells us that seek after righteousness and God will provide for us. Well, righteousness, you could apply that term very broadly. Righteousness means right living. Right living means that we're really honest with our money. We don't serve money. We serve the Lord. So we start walking in this way. It changes our character. It molds the things that we want in life. And it's through that kind of character transformation that we're able to kind of walk that way. And also just to develop a severe distaste of debt, because it is truly a way to make other people wealthy and to keep us in poverty. So I get to the point where I just hate the idea of debt. When I see a credit card commercial, or I'm at Home Depot and they want to push a credit card on me, I'll never forget that once my wife and I we were paying off some debt. And on this large purchase we had at the time at Home Depot, if you take out a credit card, we can knock 10% off or 20% off. It was a pretty good deal. My wife says, "Get behind me, Satan." The lady at the cash register cracked up, and we were kind of joking. We don't live that way, but it's really true. We just try to just keep that temptation out of our life. If it's something that we really need, we really want, we'll work for it and we'll save for it.
Yeah. It's possible, and it's a better way to live.
It truly is. It is so much more enjoyable. I love what Dave Ramsey says. You live like no one else so that you can live like no one else. Mm-hmm. It'll be hard to begin with because you're doing away with some of the things that you would want to have tomorrow. But in the future, we see most of the time people have a lot more reserves for the things that they might want at that time. And their friends that are still in debt don't. So you're living like no one else so that you can live like those people that are still stuck in that rut.
So listening to you talk about raising your kids, what I hear is a theme that's pretty consistent with what we talk about here on a regular basis in this show, and that's this idea of raising adults. Not just raising kids and raising dependents, but we're raising adults. And in fact, I remember the first time I heard somebody tell me, describe what you just described. Like we tell our kids, you've got three options. It's military, it's career, or it's college and then career. But staying at home, so to speak, is not an option. There's a real intention in there that as a parent for this season, I am preparing my child to be able to go out and launch on their own and be that man or be that woman and learning the concepts of money and debt and investing and giving and budgeting and all that. It's an important part of that raising adult philosophy. And it's what I hear was part of your parenting process when your kids were younger.
Yeah, it was. It wasn't as deliberate. If I had to do it over again, I would have been a little bit more deliberate, just because we got caught into a lot of debt cycle and we had a lot of stress. And so it was hard, but the thing is, my wife and I, we've always lived fairly modestly, and we always were hard workers. And we lived transparently. So when we were paying off debt and going through some of these things, we lived out loud. We told our kids some of the mistakes that we made and that we should avoid them as they get older. And, they learn from that. So it's never too late to start modeling these things and teaching them to our children. And yeah, I mean, the biggest regret is if we teach our kids bad habits and then they see them go off in life and repeat some of the same things that we did that were wrong. I mean, that would be painful. We wanted them to have successful lives. That was our desire. And they're doing really good. Are they perfect? No, but we just couldn't be more blessed with how we see them right now. They're both like in their late 20s, early 30s. So it's just been really fun to see that some of the things that we tried to teach them and some of the things that we sacrificed for and it seemed to make a difference.
One of the concepts I've heard you suggest on a couple of occasions is modeling. And of course, as parents, that's part of the job description. But what I think I hear in what you're talking about is maybe a little more transparency, a little more openness when it comes to money than we might be inclined toward. And who knows, maybe there's personality components here. Maybe there's, husband-wife relationship components here. But I think looking back on my own parenting journey, my youngest is 16, and so she's not too far away from launching on her own. I wonder if we would have been better off giving them a glimpse of our process and giving them some more understanding of what's behind some of the decisions we're making, right? Not just right. Mom and dad said, or mom and dad chose not to buy this. They might have concluded that we couldn't afford it. They might have concluded we didn't want it. There's different conclusions. I wonder if maybe we would have been better served at just being more transparent. Like, here is what we spend on a monthly basis, and here are those fences that we've talked about, or that you talked about, that we've put up. Maybe I'm thinking into this too much, but what I hear you potentially suggesting, or at least what's coming to mind, is as a dad, be a little bit more open to give you, as your kids are old enough to right. And mature enough to understand the concepts, give them a little bit more insight into what it's like managing the finances of a household, right?
Yeah. No, I think it's important. It just depends on their age and maturity level. But I think it's important to demonstrate to them that I tithe each week. My trust is in the Lord. What does that look like? I remember my parents back in the olden days, they would have these giving envelopes. And they would stuff. My mom and dad didn't make much money, but boy, they tithe each week to the Methodist Church. I remember them stuffing dollar bills in those envelopes. And I was like, that made an impression on me. I still remember to this day. But I think if we need to communicate to our kids that there are limits and there's consequences. Well, if we buy this, then we won't be able to do that. Now, will their mind that's not fully adult formed biologically understand that? No. But I think repetition. No, we've chosen not to because we have different priorities, or there'd be a consequence if we bought this versus that. And if they compare it to their friends, we say, look, we celebrate what your friends are able to do. That's awesome. Every family's different. So a lot of times they're going to really run into that as they get older.
Again, back to that potential for competition thinking that is flipped into, we celebrate that. I celebrate that in your mom or in the spouse. I celebrate that in others. But as a family unit, our priorities, our goals are a little bit different. And so we're, this is the path that we're walking.
Yeah. So, my daughter, when she was 15 and a half, she goes, "Hey, Dad, what kind of car am I getting at age 16? I was like, I don't know. What kind of car did you save for?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of having those conversations. Your friend down the street has a this car. The conversation didn't end up that, but if it did, I'd say, look, that's an awesome car. We celebrate that. But we have a different plan. So let's talk about the transportation plan. We'll have a shared car. It won't be yours. You go away to college. You won't have a car the first few years, and then we enable you to be able to afford a car later on. So yeah, we'd like to help you with that, because we don't want you just to be working to buy a car. We want you to be in college and doing some of those things. So that's what we did.
Yeah. Again, back to maybe if there were a round two, you might do it a little bit different, but that intention and that communication and that here's our plan, here's our priorities, here's our shared values, and we're trying to help you as our child understand some of this, and then 18 and beyond, you get to make your own decisions. And
Right.
Happy to help, but good luck. We've invested in you, and now it's your turn to go and do your thing.
And there'll be a process after they turn age 18. They won't be total self-sufficient as kids. So there's an interaction, as they go to college and they're working through things. Yeah. It's not just like, I'm done with you, see you later.
Yep.
So it'll be a transition, and that's fine. But there is that expectation of self-sufficiency.
So I know there's a dad that's listening that is thinking, boy, I've got some work to do here. My communication with my spouse isn't what it needs to be. I'm probably not modeling the good financial stewardship to my kids the way I should be, and I want to make some change. What would you say to that dad? I know it's a big question, but just to get started and to begin to build some momentum, what would you say, or what would you suggest to that dad that wants to take some steps forward in this space?
I would recommend that they have a few short, non-judgmental conversations with their spouse that are transparent and open. That you might even offer, some transparency, maybe even a little repentance, say, honey, this is stressful. How do you feel? Ask lots of questions. Say, this is how I feel. I probably haven't done, life has just been flying along. We got married. Before you know, we have kids and a house and everything. And things are just, things are kind of stressful. We're not doing some of the things that we would like to have when it comes to money. And so just kind of having an open-ended conversation. But with there to be a goal in mind, and that is that there would be a mutual understanding that, we could do better and we could learn more. And then I would say, well, how can we go about learning more? Do we need to hire a financial coach? Somebody that doesn't sell any products or do any financial planning. There are financial coaches out there. Or maybe we could take a class that's really good. Dave Ramsey, Financial Peace University is a really good class that couples can take together. You can take it in person during COVID, you can do it online. And that's a really good starting place for a lot of couples.
What about some other resources that you would suggest? Things that you've used either in your professional context or books or other people that are trusted in this space that you could point dads to?
Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover is a really good book to just get the discussion going. Another interesting book from the secular world, and that's not an overly religious book. It has some scriptural concepts throughout. But another good book just from the secular world is The Millionaire Next Door. It's just it came out about 20 years ago, and I'm sure it's been revised a few times. It's an excellent book that helps people understand a different way of looking at money. Those are good books. Ladies can really relate to Mary Hunt books. Debt Proof Living is an excellent book. 7 Money Rules for Life is an also excellent book. She also has Debt Proof Your Marriage. So Mary Hunt, Dave Ramsey are really good starting place books for they're down to earth, easy to relate to. They can start the discussion.
Got it.
Overnight, it might take 6 months to a year really to go through this change.
Yeah, you didn't get into the situation you're in overnight, and you're not going to get out of it overnight. But even just having some trusted resources to take that next step and to guide along the way is it's good.
Now, if somebody was really wants to get a little bit more involved in what God says about money, a really good book, and it's really quite short, is Randy Alcorn's Managing God's Money book. It's a paperback. You can buy it again for probably less than $5. But that's an excellent book. If you really want to know what God's word says about money in just black and white terms, that's an excellent book. I recommend that everyone should have that in the library and read through it at least once. I'm trying to put myself in your shoes after having listened to this discussion. I'm sure you're both encouraged, but also a little bit maybe stressed about the process. But let me tell you, let me encourage you, it's worth it. It's worth it for the gains that you'll achieve in your own growth. It's worth it for your relationship with your spouse. It'll grow. It's worth it for you financially. You will benefit from the hard work that you put into it. You can do it. I've seen people from all parts of life with all different kinds of education and financial backgrounds do this and do it well. So I just want to encourage you. It's worth the time and the effort to place into it, and you will do well. I'm confident in it.
Oh, that's great, man. I appreciate you coming on today to talk about this topic. It's one that we've flirted with in the past, but have yet to really get into. And so your wisdom, your experience, your advice, your stories have been super helpful. And I know, like, you know, the statistics, I can't quote them, but of all of the stressors in a family, money is at the top. And so if dads, if you guys can get this thing done well and done right, then there's so many other carry-on benefits in the relationship and in the family. And so, Kent, I appreciate you being with us today and sharing your expertise and helping our listeners grow in this area of managing money. If there's a listener that's interested in having a deeper chat with you and some of the ways that you help couples or individuals in your ministry, what's the best way for them to reach out or get a hold of you and go a little bit deeper or connect with you in a conversation?
Yeah, they could just send me an email to kent.irwin, IRWIN, at vineyardcolumbus.org, and I'd be happy to talk to them.
Fantastic. Well, normally when we get to the end of an episode, I issue some encouragement and challenge to go deeper. I think that basically you handled that this time. And so thank you. Sure. I couldn't have said it better had I tried. And so I appreciate that. And listeners, it's up to you. So go forth and go do, and you will be better off for it. Kent, thanks once again for being with us. Listeners, we will be back, same bat time, same bat channel next week. Thanks for being part of this community and journeying with us. As always, if you've got any feedback, you can get us at feedback@thenextmanup.com. Or if you want to check us out on social, we're at NMU Journey on Facebook. You can find us there. All right, guys, until next time, adios. Hey, listeners, thanks for journeying with us on this Next Man Up podcast. You know, we would love to hear from you. Maybe you have a question or an idea, perhaps a topic for us to consider. If that's you and you want to reach out to us, you can get us at feedback@thenextmanup.com. That's feedback@thenextmanup.com. Again, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, we'll see you later.